The left are well aware that they've lost men. They've just lost men. They don't have anything to pitch to young men anywhere ever. And they're well aware that Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes and whoever else are running away with the young male demographic. And so they're trying to create their own kind of woke manosphere. But the problem that they have is it basically always bends around to the original point. And even by the end of this, the author's like, the interviewer is like, you kind of sound like Jordan Peterson. It's like, well, there might be a reason for that. So this is about a guy called Scott Galloway who has written a book called Notes on Being a Man, which I've never heard of. But he does say he sounds like he could be some podcaster tech bro. But in reality, he's almost the opposite. Liberal, left-leaning, and surprisingly sensitive. The guy who advises his readers on how to address the masculinity crisis, build mental strength, and raise good sons, has been described as a progressive Jordan Peterson. Okay, well, I mean, Lord knows they were going to present one to us eventually. He now lives in Britain because he views it as being more progressive. If you're talking about assault rifles or bodily autonomy, it's not even a discussion here, much to our chagrin. Anyway, when Galloway first started talking about masculinity, he says, people weren't prepared to listen. It was like, here's more misogyny. Here's more men blaming women. The gag reflex was so strong. Well, I wonder why it always comes out the same. I wonder why that if you advantage women against men, literally to the detriment of men, on purpose, it kind of seems like, well, guys, I think it is something to do with gender and sex. I think actually giving women all of the men's jobs has had an effect on men. He says, though, that this has changed now, because I assume they're looking at Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes and going, right, okay, we do have to do something about this, but we're not sure what to do. And he points out that there are plenty of statistics to show that young men really are in trouble. So the manosphere, the right-wing podcast bros, they're all correct. That's what he's saying. They're all correct, and they are a consequence of what the progressive left has done to society, and these are the people who have been negatively affected by it. He draws on writers such as Richard Reeves and Jonathan Haidt to point out that, yeah, everything. It's everything. Everything from boys' school suspensions to male unemployment, addictions, loneliness, and failure to complete college. We're going to graduate probably 2 women for every 1 man from college in the next 5 years because men drop out at a greater rate. Well, I mean, this is an incredible admission that yes, there is an active campaign against men as men in almost all spheres of public life. Now, the correct thing to do would be to end that campaign, stop advantaging women, and allow the world to return to its kind of natural equilibrium. I remember a while ago seeing some statistics from the turn of the 20th century that showed about 5% of professors are women. It's like, right, okay, so it was possible for professors to become women to become professors. It's just most didn't. And, you know, by about the sort of midpoint of the 20th century, it was about like 15, 20%. So not many. And with no barriers in place at all, it gets up to about 35%. And if you look at a lot of parliaments, 35% of the people in the parliament would be women. It's like, right, so that seems to be about the sort of natural equilibrium, right? So it's not that women can't do these things, it's that overall, women are less inclined to do these things by a factor of about 2 to 1. That seems fair to me. That seems like a fair society, where the women who want to be able to do these things can do these things, but mostly it'll be the men who want to do it, and so they get to do it instead. Anyway, he points out that the 2 groups that pivoted hardest towards Trump in 2024 were young men and women aged 45 to 64. My thesis is that's the mothers of young men. So young men and their mums are like, God, I would like society to start helping out my sons. I'm tired of society being geared towards penalising my sons for being men. And that's really interesting, isn't it? While Trump embraced the manosphere, the Democrats championed the interests of virtually every special interest group except for young men, he argues. Well, that's because how would you champion the interests of young men and feminism at the same time? How would you champion the interests of young men and women at the same time? It seems genuinely impossible to square that circle, and so the Democrats just picked a lane. And they said, you know what, fuck young men. They're part of the patriarchy, they're oppressive, we don't like them. So in his book, he argues that the solutions to men's problems often boil down to a set of pithy codes and maxims, which often feel like common sense, but others feel rather old-fashioned. Oh, really? So you can change society to benefit women, but you can't change women. One of his oft-repeated tenets, for example, is that men provide, protect, provide, and procreate. You could easily also say the same of women. Yeah, but they don't. Women don't protect and they don't provide. They do procreate, or at least they should procreate, but they don't protect and provide. That's literally the job for the men. So if you said it the same as women, then you'd be wrong. Galloway tends to see the protect element in the context of men using their physical strength for good, but that's exactly how anyone else sees it. The farthest right misogynist would still say men use their physical strength for good to protect their women. And the provide element he couches in largely economic terms. That's because it is economic. I tell my sons, when you're in the company of women, you pay for everything. Sorry, the company of women. If I'm going out with just a group of friends and they're mostly women, I'm not paying for their meals. If you can't, you don't go out. A woman is not going to have sex with a man who splits the bill with her. I mean, that sounds positively reactionary, doesn't it? Because that is obviously true. But also, you're not taking into account the new environment in which your son lives. Like, he is going to be struggling. The women around him probably out-earn him. They're definitely, as you point out, going to be higher educated than he is. It's going to be pretty difficult for him to do that, isn't it? She doesn't really need him, is basically the message from this. But no, he has to struggle along. Because he is right. A woman isn't going to have sex with a man who splits the bill with her. That's true. His sons tell him there's a boomer view of modern dating, which is true, because the world has changed. It's not like with the boomers. But he says, I try to go where the data takes me. Research shows that society and men themselves are really hard on men when they're not economically viable. Wow, really, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, obviously that's fucking true, but shouldn't that have meant that when the feminists were like, we want actually the corporate CEOs to be girl bosses and for 50% of women to be in these positions, you should say, no, you'll make it really hard on men when they're not economically viable. Nobody's hard on women when they're not economically viable. It's totally fine for women to not be economically viable. But it definitely hurts men. But was any consideration made? No. Men were like, I guess we'll just be cast out to the wolves then. And that's exactly what happened. And if men aren't economically viable, that's when the problems start. Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. We've been saying this for a decade now. But yes, that's totally true. They're just going to have an absence of mating opportunities. That's right, you're going to get the incel revolution. And when men don't have a romantic relationship, they tend to come off the tracks. That's true. Men have a difficult time maintaining friendships with that romantic partner. They tend to reallocate that energy into conspiracy theory. Do they? Going extremely online, porn, and they never develop the skills to establish a romantic relationship. Yes, that's right. And if we actually thought, well, maybe we owe men something as a society, then women would have to basically wind their necks in and accept, no, you're not going to be the guys in charge just because you're women. If you earn it, sure, no one's going to complain. You start a business or you work really hard, get all the qualifications you need, actually outcompete the men in a field, no one's going to complain. But if you're on an all-woman shortlist and you're rocketed up the chain, you keep failing upwards just because you're a woman, like so many women in the Labour Party, then that's where a bit of resentment's going to start compounding, isn't it? He says, I worry we are literally evolving a new breed of asexual, asocial male. That's true. That is basically what you're doing. But you can see they're like, well, his analysis can be somewhat Darwinian and reductive, a little bit men of this and women of this. Yeah, but these are broadly true statements. Generalizations aren't just because they're a generalization doesn't mean they're inaccurate. They're coloured by nostalgia for a patriarchal order, a bygone patriarchal order. Nuances of race or sexuality barely addressed. Okay, but these are still true statements. But I love this bit. But isn't it also a bit Jordan Peterson? It's like, yeah, it's because whether you like it or not, if you're going to talk accurately about a particular subject, no matter what perspective you're approaching that subject, there are going to be certain features about the subject that everyone has to triangulate on. And so everyone's interpretation of the subject is going to be something similar in some way, unless you're an insane radical, of course. Any compassionate and concerned take on the crisis of men is going to sound a bit Jordan Peterson. That's completely correct. It's completely correct. And that's not a problem. But of course, he's like, yeah, well, I mean, where I differ from Jordan Peterson is he always reverse engineers into an incredibly conservative viewpoint that sometimes, in my view, takes women's rights away. It's like, well, okay, no one's opinion can take people's rights away. But why would it be that he arrives at an incredibly conservative viewpoint, and then when you're doing it, they're like, wow, this sounds like an incredibly conservative viewpoint? It's like, yes, because conservative society was set up to serve both men and women, and modern progressive society is set up only to serve women. And so any amount of trying to help men in this kind of society will sound conservative. And he says that Jordan Peterson's view basically goes back to this notion of women are happiest when they're in a supporting role to men. I just don't think that's accurate. Well, the thing is, women will self-report this, as I've covered in previous videos. Women would like it if men were the breadwinners. They're just not prepared to give up being the breadwinners themselves. And they're not prepared to step into the breadwinner role either and marry down. So what are you going to do? Galloway is at pains to point out that he's not blaming women for men's problems. All right, it must be someone else, right? Who's to blame for men's problems? We set up a society that expressly advantages women, but it's not women or feminism that is to blame here. No, I do not think the answer is in any way to economically disadvantage women. I'm not trying to repackage violence here and say women need to lower their standards such that we don't have a bunch of angry men out there. Well, I'll tell you what, man, let's just carry on as we are. I think men need to level up. How about men? Men are constantly leveling up. They always have. That's why men are generally brilliant at whatever they're doing, because nobody ever gives, especially if you're a white man, no one gives you a break. No one gives you something for free. There are no affirmative action programs for you. If you want to get somewhere, you've got to be good at it. That's it. And so all we need to do is stop artificially balancing the scales in favor of women. That's literally all that would need to be done. Anyway, he says this is a battle between the liberal and illiberal. It's not a battle between men and women. Well, the liberal side has chosen women against men. So the liberal side is for women, and the illiberal side naturally takes on the aspect of being for men. So it kind of is still a battle of men and women. The only difference is the illiberal side also has a positive view of women and a positive life plan for them. It's just not as the CEO of random companies because they've been shoved up into the roles. The genders have done a great job of convincing themselves it's the other gender's fault. I just don't think that's productive. No, it is ideological, but the ideologies are weaponizing, or one ideology is weaponizing one sex against the other. And anyway, so as you can see, he carries on, but there's not that much left in there that's interesting. He carries on, and it's not that I don't think he has a point, obviously. There is a problem. It's just because of the waters he's swimming in and the ideology that he's wedded to, he's never going to be able to solve any of these problems. Because the problem is literally to say, stop advantaging women unfairly over men. And everything sorts itself out. Within a generation, you will find everything sorted back out. But that's not going to happen because that's literally the plan. The plan was literally to dethrone the straight white man from his position of being a protector and provider. And so this guy's saying, you know what, guys, I think men need to be protectors and providers. Well, good luck. Good luck with that in feminist society and the interviews with The Guardian. And the fact that you keep ending up on the Jordan Peterson position makes it kind of sound there's a reason for that, don't you think?